Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so here are the shoes. I'll just take a second here to get set up. Thank you so much. So I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be here. Everybody's talking about the Saturday morning and the grey, but I feel full of sunshine, one with that fantastic music that was selected, but also my heart is feeling so full of gratitude to see so many parents out here to listen to how many 26 different workshops. This is a board that is absolutely a village to raise children. So I am, as you heard, I'm an infant, child, and adolescent psychiatrist. I try and multitask all the time, as you're watching, and I want to share with you. I want to share with you some thoughts, some ideas that I have learned about in my it's actually 35 years as a shrink, if you can believe it. It should have made me shrink more, but anyway, that's another story. What you need to know about me, one of my greatest claims to fame is that my daughter-in-law teaches with the Halton District School Board, Madame Horowitz, and she is fantastic. Yeah, she is absolutely fantastic. I should have asked her exactly which school she's at because I'm in Hamilton. So she is the wonderful, wonderful wife of my oldest son and my two grandchildren there. But I have 5 great kids. I don't have another couple that aren't so great that I don't talk about, just so you know. And I now have 8 grandchildren, and the oldest is 6. So I want you just to picture our family get-togethers. So I am a specialist in the early years. Guess why? I get to practice what I preach. So I love the title of your conference, Nurturing the Whole Child, Mind, Body, and Spirit. And my presentation is Love Builds Brains. It happens to be the name of the book that I wrote as well. And it pulls together a lot of the talks that I've done over the years. But I'm going to, I hope, build you up in the work and the love that you bring your kids. Because what we now know is, we've got this crisis in adolescent and child mental health that's climbing up, but we are never, ever going to be able to have enough psychiatrists and psychologists and child and youth work. We're never going to have enough people to treat all of the difficulties away. Not only that, we have a huge resource in building the mental well-being of our kids, and it's you and it's the educators in their life. So I spend a lot of my time now making sure that I'm talking to as many people as will listen to say, you know what, you make a difference. You make a huge difference. Your love, your support for the school is absolutely essential. I can blind you with all the scientific experiences, but I won't do that because one of the things here is that we're feeling like, are we out of it yet? Are we done? Many of us have felt that we're climbing this unbelievably high mountain, and some of us feel that we finally made it to the top, and then there's another frickin' variant. Now, I'll tell, warning, I should have one of those things. The following presentation may contain some words that sound like they're sweary words, but they're not. Because I'm Scottish, I get to say them. But you know, the reality is that we have, as parents, as grandparents, you as parents and as educators, have gone through a whole lot. It's been tough times. And one of the things I want to say to you is that we can't waste our energy focusing on the things that we can't change. You're here today, I hope, to hear about the things that you can do in moving forward. Our kids, you know, the dialogue about catching them up, Well, let's not focus on catching them up. Let's focus on them feeling that they belong, that they're important, that they're valued. Because once you focus on that, then I'll show you, because I'm a brain geek, I'll show you that that means that their brain is more open to learning faster. So first connect. First help them belong. Help them feel that they're valued, as our guys who are helping us up here feel today as they contribute. If we can create an education system that helps them engage in their world, to change that world, man oh man, we're going to see huge flourishing happening. So you might wonder, what am I doing as a shrink here talking to you instead of being in my office? I spend most of my time these days traveling, in fact, the globe, talking to people. I'm actually rushing from here to address 1,000 people in British Columbia by Zoom, just so you know. I do not have a supersonic. But I talk to anybody who will listen to me. But people say, Jean, when we've got this big crisis, why aren't you in your office seeing kids? And it's it tugs at my heart. It tugs at my heart. But you know, a very, very important teacher said to me, the late Dr. Paul Steiner, he said, you know, Jean, we feel like we're in the rushing river. You know, all the kids with troubles and problems and disorders, we're trying to grab them as they're rushing by. We need to figure out, how can we be upstream so they don't fall in the river in the first place? Let's not just be the ambulance down in the valley, but let's figure out how we build the fence so that kids are not falling into these problems. So I'm an upstreamist, periodically an extremist. I was an advisor to the last government, not this government, just so you know, last government for 4 years. And I was a pretty extremist at times. You know, with the Premier, Kathleen Wynne, I said to her one of our meetings, you know, is it possible that all of the testing that's happening is making our kids sick? And can we think about what is the purpose of education? And that was when she was bringing in, and the ministry was bringing in, well-being as a pillar of education. So if we're thinking that education really needs a transformation, and that's what I'm here to tell you, and I see wonderful things happening in your board around this, that we need to be thinking, well, what is our guiding light? What is our North Star? And I want to share with you that I once heard a Mohawk elder, Tom Porter, speak. And he said, in their Mohawk tradition, the teachings, the gifts of the elder, is that children are the sacred ones. Children are the heart of the nation, and it takes the village to raise the child. It's a sacred responsibility of the village to raise the child. As I look out at you and I see the multicultural beauty that is our land now, I recognize that it's not only the indigenous traditions who see children as the sacred and blessed ones. So that means think about every interaction as educators, as parents, that you have been given a gift from the Creator, or whichever power you believe in, to find out what the gifts and the challenges are. Now, there's a bit of a kicker, because you're not allowed to give the gift back, even though sometimes I tell you, I'm going to talk about the adolescent brain. I'll tell you there were times I would like to have given some of mine back in those years. But you know, the vision of the elders, think about children as sacred and precious. If we think about that, then it changes our behavior. If we think that children with special rights, I do not say special needs children, I say special rights children. They're not deficit in need. They're different. They're beautiful in their difference. And our role is not to make them normal. Our role is to figure out what is their full potential. How can they reach and be the best that they can be? So what's the North Star belief? Well, I say that education is about human development. We need our educators to think about human development. And I think my role as a parent, my mantra, was always progress, not perfection. Because with 5 kids, something works with one. Anybody else find this? Something works with one that does not work with the next one. You know, my first son was very easy. He was an easygoing baby. So we thought we were perfect parents, right? Yeah, we're great. And then 18 months later, along comes my daughter, Kathlina. And she was a challenge. We started reading all these books, and one of the books that I never recommend, one of these books that was talking about difficult children, called them mother killers. So, of course, a shrink is not going to recommend that book. But of our North Stars, so we had to learn all about temperament. So our North Star belief as parents has been to raise them to be carpenter, no, gardeners, yes. That we want to create the ecosystem so that they can be the kindest, most humane, empathic beings who can contribute to their own knowledge and well-being, but also to contribute to others. So as we're thinking about this in terms of you as parents in an education system, I want to talk about the development of the whole child and how it may be that sometimes it gets lost in education, that the development of the whole child is important. Let me give you an example. I had this reporter call me up one day and she said, Jean, I'm reading this report. I'm reading this report that says that children, it was California, children who are age 4 and 5, they can read and write, but they cannot get along. And I went, oh, Agnes, that's the tyranny of cognitive seduction. Isn't that awesome? I just made it up right on the spot. The tyranny of cognitive seduction. And I hate to say it, but we have gone down that road in education in Ontario. We've thought that academics, reading and writing and science are the only important objective until recently. When we say in Ontario, and our Ontario Education Act indicates that the well-being of kids is just as important, that we need to think about that medicine ring. We need to be thinking about the emotional, the spiritual, the cognitive, and the physical in balance. But hugely, and this is so important for us as parents to think about, are we creating a sense of belonging in our homes, in our schools? Are we ensuring that all of our newcomer families to our schools, through your PIC organizations, are made to feel that they belong, that they matter, that their different ways of seeing and understanding the world is valued and is thought to be important? And so relationships are central. So we need to be asking ourselves, and you as parents in the multicultural mosaic that we are, need to be ensuring in our academic settings that the child's identity is absolutely accepted, that they are accepted for who they are. But we also need to be thinking about joy. As you focus and you fret as parents about homework and all kinds of other assignments and marks and what have you, I'd love if you just also started to fret about where is the joy in learning that I want my kids to have and experience. So we want to be thinking lots more about the mental health of kids. We want to be thinking not just about mental illness, but mental well-being. Why? Because these are what are called VUCA times, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. You've heard this so many times, we do not know what the jobs are going to be when our kids grow older and are looking for work. So that means that we need to be deeply thinking about what are the skills and the competencies that they need to thrive and to flourish in the world coming to them. So it means we need to think about well-being. And think about well-being as not just absence of illness, but as actually flourishing. And there's a wonderful, wonderful document, again from the First Nations, that says that mental well-being is all about that balance. And that we need, and this is so, it really rang true for me as a parent and as a nana, that we need to be thinking about how can we help our young people create a sense of purpose. So many kids, you ask them, why are you at school? And they say to get marks to go on to college or to do this. Well, how about the purpose is to build my brain, to have deep learning, to get excited and contribute back to the world. How about that as a purpose of education? Having hope, having a sense of belonging and meaning in daily life. Now, you know what? I just spoke the other day in Manitoulin Island. And one of the questions that people were pondering is, why is it that our kids these days are feeling so overwhelmed, right? They feel we've got this whole sense that they're overwhelmed, they can't cope. And I think it's so important that you are all here together today to talk to each other and to learn from others about how our young people are going to be the answer to our difficulties. That they are being raised in a polycrisis world. They're being raised in a world where there's all this non-stop multimedia, social media, technology. They're being bombarded with all of these stories, and they're not being told or encouraged to think about, how can I change the world? They're not being encouraged, except for our wonderful Cindy and Ethan, as they're grabbing this and they'll educate in the seminars that they're doing. We need to be changing the dialogue about from how disastrous the world is to, you know what, when there's chaos, who knows what can be created? Who knows what can be created? There's a wonderful book called Hope by Tad Homer Dixon. And he says that in moments of crisis, you can create, chaos theory tells us, you can create new things. And so youth well-being has to be a top priority. Now, some of us are a little bit worried about screen time. Anybody else a little bit worried about screen time? Yeah. Anybody else feeling a little bit guilty about how through COVID the kids were on screens a bit more just to keep you frickin' sane? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Quit the guilt. Believe me, I'm a shrink. Guilt does nada. I'm also Catholic, so I can tell you from a double-barrel perspective, guilt does nothing. It does not help. But you know, Maya Angelou says we do the best we can with what we know, and when we know better, we do better. So now is the time when we have to address and say, I got it, I did it, but now it's time. We can change. Our brains are capable of change throughout life. So some of you know my work in early childhood education. Some of you know that I'm a big brain geek. I'm a big brain geek. And why I'm a brain geek is that my understanding of child and adult behavior has been hugely informed by learning how the brain works. So here's a mini lesson on how the brain works. We used to think that the brain was a kind of a fixed organ, that it was static. And if you injured it, if you had a stroke when you were older or a brain injury when you were younger, well, we'll do the best we can, but there's not a lot that can change. That is so not the case anymore. What we know is that the brain is capable of change throughout life. That what we used to think was genes determined who we are. I'm fascinated about what this is. What Zena is doing. But the brain is capable of change throughout life, that when you injure your brain, you can in fact rewire it. You can rewire it. So what we want here is, Zena, let me see so I can read out. You're looking for a mama. Ryan Nazar's mum, you're needed. Your number one job is calling. You're welcome. You're welcome as a mama. I know it. So where was I? About this brain that gets distracted. So your brain is not just produced by your genes. And in fact, what we're now learning is that the brain and the genes are listening to the environment. The brain's genes get turned on by experience. Now, the DNA doesn't get changed, but little tags called epigenetics, I won't get into just now, but if you're fascinated by the brain, look up epigenetics. So our brain is sculpted by a lifetime of experience. Your brains are being changed now as you're listening to me. Your brains, though, have been formed by the experiences that you've had. So you hear my Scottish accent. It's Scottish, that's what it is. Isn't it lovely? Isn't it lovely? So I was 11 when I came to Canada. And so my brain cells were exposed to the sound of the Scottish language, all of the rules of how you talk and how you look and all of those things was built into my brain. And what got wired up got really tightly wired. I got hardwired to speak with this accent. I can't speak without it. Even when I try French, like I try with my grandson who is bilingual. And so when I speak French, I still have this frickin' Scottish accent. But that's because everything else got pruned away. But now you hear my Scottish accent, and maybe it brings to mind, this is your neurons firing, maybe it brings to mind some funny movies like Mrs. Doubtfire. Remember Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire? Or even the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Or maybe some of you are Trekkie fans, Star Trek fans. Any Star Trek fans out there? You know, ach, Captain, she'll never hold. Right? Yes, you love Scotty. So as you hear my Scottish accent, it brings into your memory things Scottish for you. Now, I say, for most people, I hope, that makes them laugh and they think it's funny. But what if you have a mother-in-law who, as my children say, it's not swearing, is a real biatch? You may not laugh so much if that. Now, I used to be able to say that without any hesitation, but now I am a Scottish mother-in-law. So I have to be careful what I say. So, how does the brain get built? And I love that there are early childhood educators in the audience because early childhood, man, oh man, that is a time when all those brain cells, those neurons are being turned on, they're being activated by being loved by their early childhood educator, just like they get from you as parents. But that we know that there's a million new connections a second happening in the early years. So when little ones are read to and sung to and hugged and picked up, that is literally sculpting the architecture of their brain. Now, the brain doesn't say, I'm just taking in good things, thank you very much. No. We also know that the brain learns what it's exposed to. And so what we know now is that the brain is built by the experience. So if a child experiences neglect or maltreatment or trauma, then that is what is building their brains. That's why I have been such a big supporter of Ontario's early years strategy, because our kindergarten in the early years, and don't forget it with this right to read, the kindergarten program is a play-based, inquiry-led, where when you have the conditions where the kids are excited about learning, then the lower parts of their brain where they're stressed is not active, and the top parts where they learn are active. Kids learn through play, not through frickin' drill and kill. Just a message to anybody who might be listening, she said. So the brain develops from the bottom up, from the inside out. And what we now know is that all of the stimulus comes in through the bottom of the brain. So if you're in a high stress situation, your brain is in fight or flight. Your amygdala, that porcupine, that area of your brain that says, watch out, be on guard, there's danger here, gets fired up and wired up. Where we want education to be, and where we want our education of ourselves with our kids to be, is up at the top part of the brain. It's blue here. The brain is actually all gray and kind of mushy, like room temperature butter, so don't shake it about too much. We want education. We want the system to be in the place where the kids are calm, alert, and ready to learn. In order to get there, they need to have a sense of belonging, connection, relationship. So here's a mantra that I give to all of the educators across the North America, well, a lot of places. So first of all, you need to regulate. Have any of you ever talked one of your kids out of a temper tantrum? No. First, you have to regulate. You have to say, I see you're really upset. Let's just sit and snuggle until you settle down. Or let's just come over and do some coloring until you settle down. Then you can talk to them. So who we are as parents is co-regulators. First you regulate, then you relate, then you can reason. So to go from emotional dysregulation, kids losing their stuff. They need us to be calm, to be collected. But the problem is, oftentimes, when they're losing their stuff, it triggers us. We are just as much in fight or flight as they are. So we need to, and I'll finish when we get to the end, we need to be thinking about, first, calm yourself. But what do we need to be thinking about more and more? We need to be thinking about, particularly in these challenging times, because they are, that love is what our kids need. That what they need is for them to feel safe. They need to feel seen. I see you. I hear you. I feel what you're going through. It doesn't mean that you're pushovers. It doesn't mean that you allow the behavior, but it does mean that first you connect before you correct. When they feel safe and seen, then they can feel soothed and secure. So why is all this so important? Well, because what we know is the brain is a social organ. We are absolutely wired to connect. Feeling a sense of belonging and love is not just a nice thing. It is an essential thing for thriving. So here we've got a picture. I love this picture. I always show it. This is my oldest son and my oldest grandson. And don't you see the joy in their connection there? I have a dream that every single child will have at least one adult whose eyes light up when they enter the room. Do your eyes light up for your kids? Or are you too worried about how they're going to turn out, how they're doing? Remember, if you can, this moment and think about, first my eyes need to light up. Why? The biology, I am a brain geek, I acknowledge. When your eyes light up, your pupils dilate. When your pupils dilate, the other person's heart rate goes up and it releases endorphins, natural morphines in the brain. So it's rewarding and you look for more of it. Now, does this mean that you have to have these long, intense conversations every day with your kid? I love you. This is why I love you. These are the number of ways that I love you. These are the times I've not. No way. No way. What we now know from the science is that just brief little texts, how you doing? Thinking about you. The most powerful buffer in these times of stress is social connection. We made a big mistake by saying that we needed to be socially isolated. We should have said physically isolated but emotionally connected. Why? Because our sense of belonging, our need to belong, is a fundamental human need. If we were to ask the kids in the board, do you have a sense of belonging? And there are some great tools, the Middle Development Instrument, the MDI we have used in the Hamilton board, to see, do kids feel like they belong? Are there caring adults in the school as well as at home? And what we see is what adults think and what kids tell us oftentimes are different. And so that can mobilize to make sure that all of our kids have a sense of belonging. This has to be the basis of all equity work. Why? Because what we also know from the neuroscience is that social pain, being rejected, not belonging, activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. Social pain and physical pain have the same pathways. So, what the heck are we going to do with all of this as parents? Well, we have to think, connect before correct. But you know, as a mom of 5 kids that were just 10 years apart, I spent a heck of a lot of time being the party pooper of their life, right? I was a great manager. Well, I was a so-so manager, actually. To be honest, my husband and I made a good team. But I spent a lot of time directing and correcting them. And in fact, I wrote an article for the Ministry of Education. It's asking educators to think, what is your connection to directing and correcting ratio? What's your C to D to C ratio? Pause for a second and think about how much time are you connecting with your kids? Emotionally connecting. Now that, believe me, does not mean that you just leave them. Love, 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 love. Love is not enough. Kids need boundaries. Kid needs us to be kind, to be firm, to be fair. But you know what kids don't need is for us to have an idea of how they're supposed to turn out. They don't need us to be carpenters who say, this is the product I want, this is how you need to turn out, and this is the stuff I'm going to do to make it happen. They need us to be more like gardeners, creating the conditions, the ecosystem for kids to be able to feel that they can grow in however way is their unique way of being. We know this is not happening. When we did a survey in Hamilton looking at anti-bullying, we saw that the kids who were Indigenous, BIPOC, and LGBTQ2 spirited had more mental health challenges, a sense of belonging and connection, and being bullied was much more of what they were experiencing. So that requires, and what the Hamilton Board is looking deeply at, is a culture shift. The educators are looking at, are we being human developers? We as parents need to be thinking, are we creating the conditions for our kids to thrive? Well, how do you do it? Well, one is you make sure that you make tons of deposits in the emotional piggy bank. What does that mean? That means, so this is actually from couples work, so just anybody here with your partner or not your partner, or your partner's not here, I mean. That didn't come out right. Anyway, if you think about the more we deposit in an emotional, relational bank account, when you have to, if it's a nice, bushy, thriving bank account, when inevitably you have to take a withdrawal, you're not all tapped out, you're not bankrupt. When you've got lots of connection and lots of messaging to kids that you're important, you're valued, I know what you're in for and what you're going through. So what we also want to know, though, does all of this stuff matter once kids get out of the early years? And the answer is an absolute yes. How many of you are parents of adolescents? And that's 10 to 25. Yeah, it goes on a lot longer, guys, a lot longer. What we now know is these principles that I'm giving you apply just as strongly to the adolescents. We used to think that adolescent, they go through all of these things and it's their challenging times. We used to think it was puberty, that it was hormones. Now we know that puberty may be a trigger, but because we're now able to image the brain and look at the same kids over couples of years, what we see is that the brain changes massively during adolescence. Our mantra for adolescence is the brain is under construction. This one shows you the brain maturing over time, and the last area of the brain to develop is that top part that I was talking about, the thinking part. That's the last area to develop. But the emotional part of the brain is advancing at high speed. So you've got a fast car with a great accelerator, but lacking brakes. Only though in times of high emotion is this an issue. So here we have a picture. Does this guy know that diving into an unknown body of water from a height is dangerous? Do you think he knows it? Sure, he knows it, but what has he chosen is more important. The thrill, man. The thrill. Not only that, he's thinking that, this is a great dive. It's going to be thrilling. His little friends, not so little friends, are egging him on. And he's thinking, what a treat this will be for those people going by in the boat. Wouldn't that be so exciting for them? And you might ask, how would I know this? That's my kid. That's my kid. Under construction. So what does it mean for us as parents? If the last part of their brain to develop is their planning and organizing, they need our help. Not to do the planning and organizing, but help them join up those neurons. An example of this young fella, when he was maybe 13, 14, all of our kids ski raced. And so we live in Hamilton, so we'd have to drive to Collingwood. So 2.5 hour drive for a 30-second run to drive 2.5 hours back. Yeah, who needed their head examined? I don't know. But we had, one day we went and my boy didn't have his helmet. Now, I could have done logical consequence and said, I'm so sorry, honey. I guess you can't ski today. Are you frickin' kidding me? 5 hours of driving and I don't get him to see him ski, selfishly. But the other is I have no guarantee that my boy will be anything other than angry, and it won't change his behavior any at all. So what did we do? We sat down and said, what can we do to make sure you don't forget your helmet again? So we created a list together. And before we pulled out of the driveway, I would say, let's check the list. Then all I had to say was the list. By the end, or not too long into it, he said to me, Mom, you don't have to go over the list anymore, because as soon as I get off the ski hill, I dump everything into my ski bag. It's an absolute public health hazard. Oh my God. But it worked. Now, the message here is not that I made the decisions and did the planning for him, but that we co-constructed the planning to see how we might do it together. So, that's all well and good. But one other key factor we need to be thinking about is the impact of stress. And here's a worrying thing. When we are typical stress is very, very good for us. Starting childcare, starting high school, preparing for a test. Typical stress is good for us, is good for our kids. We should not be bubble wrapping them to have no stress, because once you've overcome stress, you recognize you're resilient, you can do it. But what we know is that when there's too much stress, the brain essentially gets fired in the limbic system, the amygdala, the fight or flight immediate acting, and new thinking does not happen. So when we think about stress then, we really need to think that not all stress is created equal. There is good stress. We need it. Do not bubble wrap your kids. There's tolerable stress. And that's stress where maybe someone dies or there's something bad happens, but you're buffered in relationship. People help you manage it. The stress we worry about is toxic stress. And so when we have normal, typical stress, there's a stressful event, our amygdala is sensing in the environment, is there threat? The hippocampus, which is new learning and memory, says, oh, have I seen this before? The prefrontal cortex says, yes, we have, and by the way, the bear's gone, if that was a threat, and down goes everything. But the problem happens when that threat is there and doesn't go away, when it's as if, what kind of brain do you want to have? If you're walking home and you run into a bear, do you want a brain that says, oh, my goodness, your teeth are different sizes? I did not know that. We don't want a brain like that. We want a brain that says, get the puck out of here right now. Just like the Maple Leafs, man. Yeah. So we want a brain that says, take off. Watch what you're doing. So now I want to shift things just for these last few minutes. I'm going to take a few more minutes. Is that okay? Just go over just a few? Not very many. Just a few more minutes. But I want you to think, how are we going to push all of this together? And I want you to think about how what we think affects how we feel, affects how we act. So if we think our role as parents is to have our kids turn out a certain way, then when they don't turn out that way, we may change our love for them. We may withdraw our love. But if we think our role is to create the conditions for them to reach their potential, then we approach it differently. So there are different ways that we can think about parenting, very, very deeply researched. And what we know is that there are certain parents who are authoritarian. They are brick wall, my way or the highway. Do it because I said so, right? I'm Scottish, so that's not an uncommon refrain that I recall. Not my dad, but certainly around us. So the brick wall parent, the problem is with brick wall parents, the kids listen to what their parents say when their parents are around, but then listen to their peers when their peers are around. The permissive family is, oh, don't put the cat in the microwave. Okay, honey, please, 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 please. So they've got lots and lots of love, but not very much control. There's another type of family that I see in my child welfare work where they have no care for their children. The sweet spot is up there in that blue section where the authoritative parent has backbone. They say, you know what? I think that I love you, but I'm not going to allow for you to do these dangerous things. So they have creating positive relationships. They enforce the rules. They're firm, they're fair, they're kind, but they are firm. So what that authoritative parent is creating is conditions where the kids feel significant, they feel safe, and they feel situated. So think about yourself. How do you think you're doing? If I were to come into your home and ask your children, I would never do this, but do you in your home feel physically safe, socially safe, emotionally safe, mentally and spiritually safe? This is what I ask schools to think about. Do you feel significant? You feel valued. You feel that you're contributing. Your contributions are valued and valuable. You feel a strong connection to one another. You feel a sense of belonging. And do your kids feel situated, that they're clear on their purpose? They're clear on direction. They know what they're about. So do you ever wonder, if you were to ask your child, as you walk in the door, do you find home to be more of a refuge or more of a stressor? Let's hope that as we think about raising the child, that love builds brains, that the kids are going to respond by saying, it is weird and woolly out there, but when I come home, I feel safe. When I come home, this is my safe harbor. That our kids have a sense of hope, and we build that sense of hope in them. We build that sense of hope in them by being collaborators and joined in with the school. We have fabulous evidence that shows when parents are engaged in the school, not just doing homework, don't get me started on homework, but not just helping them with their projects or being on the PIC committee, but actually showing a love of learning, showing an interest in what they're learning, encouraging the schools to think about deep, profound, sticky learning so that kids learn to engage the world, to change the world. When parents are encouraging their educators to think about kids turning out good at learning as well as good at life, as my friend Michael Fullen talks about. So, let me finish with a story from my friend Mary Gordon. Mary Gordon started a program called Roots of Empathy, which I think you have in the board. And that's where a parent and child come into the class once a month through the school year in elementary, and they have, and early childhood as well, and they have messages, learnings, lessons. They learn about love, they learn about how the kids grow. And in this particular time, Mary was talking to the Dalai Lama. This particular child in this class that she talked to the Dalai Lama about was 14. The other kids were 12. He had seen his mum murdered when he was 4 years of age. And he had multiple foster placements and lots of diagnoses. And anyway, the mum was talking about temperament and how they had wanted a cuddly baby, but they got who the Creator sent along, thank you very much. And he loved to interact with the world. So he was in a snuggly pack. And the mum asked, does anybody want to try the snuggly? Well, didn't this boy Daryl say that he did? So he picked up the baby, and that baby snuggled right in. And for the rest of the class, that's what he did. At the end of the class, he gave the baby back to the mum and said to the Roots of Empathy facilitator, do you think someone who's never been loved can learn to be a dad? I want you to keep that story in mind as the power of hope, as the power of connection that boy saw love live. He saw love live. I want you to know from my multiple years as a psychiatrist that you as parents, no matter what age your child is, have a huge influence on their well-being. Love literally builds brains. Your love can help support your child to flourish. And I encourage you to keep up the great work that you're doing. You make a difference. The power of one is massive, but if we pull all of our powers of one together, our kids are going to rock. And they are going to rock us as well. So thank you so much for your attention and your time. Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.